Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. And my guest today is John Saad, who is a neighbor of my sister and her husband. And welcome, John. And I know you're a leadership guy, and we'll just talk about whatever we want to talk about. But I'm sure it's going to be has something to do with the world of leadership because we're interested.
You,
So, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how we ended up talking to each other today.
yeah, Ed, good to meet you, and I look forward to meeting you in person soon. It's nice to be in Winston-Salem. So this is a homecoming for my wife and I. I went to school up here at Wake in the late 80s and graduated in the early 90s, and it's been about 35 years since we were up here, and it's nice to come back, and there's been a lot of positive changes to the city. I tell you, one of the neat things about being in Winston when you come from Atlanta is you end up realizing and appreciating what life without traffic is. Uh, but I'll tell you this, one of the issues we've had, and it's the biggest issue we've had living in Winston-Salem, is we show up everywhere too early because we're preparing to leave in Atlanta, and you've always got to do that. So it's nice to be in a city where if you got to drive 10 miles, you can leave 10 minutes before you have to be there.
That is really true. And it is the easiest city I've ever been in to get around.
You got it.
Because
So that's a big plug for our city.
I live downtown and I can be out at my sister's in about 20 minutes, and it's great. It's really a great place to live. So what have you done with throughout your career? What's the kind of work that you've done?
Yeah, so I grew up after Wake, and I went into the insurance industry and kind of worked my way up. And for the last 30-ish years, have spent my time in distribution in the insurance industry and in corporate environments. And recently have moved into a consulting role about 5 years ago, and I opened up my own consulting firm. And I'll talk about how I was influenced by that because the book came from a lot of those experiences and so forth. And I know we'll get to that, but it was really it's been an amazing career, but it's fast paced and you travel a lot and you give up a lot in your life. And so it's nice to be in a place where I can spend time on work that is truly the meaning that I want to bring to society, as well as the impact I think I can have moving forward on something greater than just one industry. And so that's the genesis of my work.
Um, I mean, when you say you travel, what does that sound like? What does that look like?
Yeah, so at the peak, I was doing about 80 flights a year. And
Wow.
it's one positive living in Atlanta is you can get anywhere in the world nonstop. So that was nice, but at the same time, when you're traveling that much, you're giving up a lot and you're running fast. And so a big part of my work today is going back and talking about the importance of what I learned from that and why slowing down and kind of looking at what you're doing is so important because so many folks, especially in big cities that are fast paced, are basically living their life in a fast forward type of mode and they don't even realize it. And I was one of those people. And it was 5 years ago when COVID hit, where I went from doing 60 to 80 flights a year uh, to being grounded. And what happened, Ed, was we were fortunate. We had been looking for mountain homes up in the Western North Carolina mountains. It's the one thing my wife and I always wanted to do. One day was retire to the mountains, and we found the place, and we ended up getting it right when COVID was going. So we got in at the right time, where all the craziness, and we all know that everyone ran to the beaches and the mountains during COVID.
Yeah.
And so I was a 2.5 hour drive to get away from 8 million people and also drop the temperature by 15 degrees. So it was a really nice change to do that. And when I went from uh, doing that drive on 285 in Atlanta and being around all the traffic, and then you would slow down and go into the mountains something started happening. And that's really where the thought for the book started 5 years ago during COVID when I slowed down. And so I'll build on that as we talk today, but that's kind of where it all began.
So let me, I mean, you've said that you were unaware of how fast you were moving. Do you think other people in similar positions like you had feel the same way?
I think a lot of folks do, because you're basically rewarded in our society today for what you accomplish and what you're seen doing. And if you think about that, with social media and the instant feedback you get for, hey, I'm out on the road, here's pictures of me with groups of people, you're constantly being rewarded in our society for fast pace and movement. And the antithesis of that is reflection, because if you slow down and take a step back, you realize that this fast pace is potentially going to create problems for you. And it could create problems in your family life. It can create problems for you in your business life, because you're moving at such a pace that you're not slowing down to think about some of the decisions you may or may not make. So um, I truly do believe that especially in the big cities, not that Winston people don't have that same issue because we get caught up here, but in the cities like New York and Atlanta and Chicago, when it's so fast paced, you literally can feel it when you're there. I truly believe you're blinded by speed.
You know, there's a German sociologist named Hartmut Rosa who has written about this and written about the acceleration that we experience in the modern world. And he he said, let me see if I can find this. I think it's maybe worth identifying because I think it's something that we all experience. And he's talking about modern society. Comes from a book called let me see if I can get this right. The
There you go.
Uncontrollability of the World. This is the shortest of all his books. He says, a modern society is one that can stabilize itself only dynamically. In other words, one that requires constant economic growth, technological acceleration, and cultural innovation in order to maintain its institutional status quo. And as a leadership guide and a consultant for decades, I see that, and I saw that in my with my clients and with other people that I knew. So what you're pointing to is really not just personal to you or personal to a few people. This is actually the nature of the modern world that we're living in, and it's tough.
It is, and I think technology really is enabling the problem. It's like putting gasoline on a fire. And some examples would be, and I'm not going to name names, but in terms of just the ability to think about something and then go to your social media account and announce it to the world without, how many times have people done that? And then they're like 2 days later going, man, I really wish I'd have thought about what I was going to say before I did it. And so in the old days, you didn't have that ability. And I think one of the best examples of reflection was Abraham Lincoln as a leader. One of the things that Abraham Lincoln would do before he would make a major decision was he would write out a letter, and he would go ahead and put all of the negative energy that he might have in that letter, and he would sit on it, and then he would reread it. So it could be a situation where, basically you've got a strategy that you're going to deal with in the battlefield. And he would write out everything, positive and negative, and he would sit on it. And then he would come back to it, and then he would reframe himself and learn from his own writing. And I think that the fact that back then they didn't have social media, reflection was more intuitive. Where today, we've got all this enablement, where it's creating a crossfire for the ability to reflect. And reflection to me, it's foundational to almost everything we do. And the more that I've done my work, and since the book came out in November, and I've started to speak on the subject, I get a lot of questions on unaddressed items in the book. I'm starting to find that tangentially, there's all kinds of reflective activity around us that's ongoing. And so what I've tried to do with my website is I have an ongoing conversation uh, on reflection in my blog on things that I'm discovering. So that the book talks about faith, family, and business as the main foundational reflective activities. However, I'm finding it all around our society. And so I'm trying to keep a fresh perspective with the blog.
I totally agree with you, and I think you're using the word reflection, and I would also add to that awareness or self-awareness. I think that,
Yeah.
and I think it didn't really begin to happen until COVID. I mean, you have described kind of the the radical change that was required of you during COVID. That you kind of woke up to say, "Oh, this is what my life is. Oh, I need to change it." And that's a level of self-awareness. But I think part of the problem is that people are looking for answers, but the answers they're being given are not actually helping them become more self-aware. And so what you're talking about is really kind of taking ownership of your own life and taking ownership of reflecting upon what is actually going on in my life and how do I understand what that means.
That's right. And I think too that if you just go back to the basis, I'm fortunate. I've got a wife that has a master. One of the things she did when we were talking about this topic was she said, you need to start out by looking at the foundational definition of reflection. And so I
Mhm.
went and looked it up, and there's really five characteristics or versions of the word, and in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it's number 4 and 5 that I'm talking about. And really, reflection in the dictionary is a noun. So if you look at what it means, it's a thought, it's an idea, it's an opinion formed as the result of meditation or consideration. But that's passive in nature. I mean, that's essentially it's something sitting on a shelf. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think what we have to do, and you brought this up in terms of intentionality, is we need to take it from the word reflection, which is a noun, and we need to move it to the word reflect, which is a verb, which is the action step that's created by it. So it doesn't just sit on a shelf, so that you put it in motion. And when you reflect, that means instead of a thought, it means to think. So it's doing something about it, to think carefully or deeply about something, to consider something thoughtfully.
Mhm.
So I think the intention is that we need to understand it's important to have reflection in your life, but to do something about it is to reflect and to move forward with action.
Where does in the process of reflection, or let me restate that, in the process of reflecting, um, where does the aspect of actually having conversation about that with people, like in your case, your wife, or with other people who are friends or close associates, what happens in how does that factor into maybe a better level of reflection?
Awesome question. And I'm looking up in the book right now. I've got chapter 3 of the book is on that topic. There's a chapter on mentorship and small groups. I'll tell you this, one of the most important things that people can do is seek out mentorship from others that have walked the path, because the reflection they can give you on the mistakes and the growth that they had can shorten your learning curve immensely. But also small groups. I'll tell you, Ed, the first thing I sought out when I came to Winston, and your brother-in-law is in my group, is a small group, because one of the most valuable things I've had the last 15 years in Atlanta was my small group. We met at 6 a.m. every Friday in Atlanta, and we were done by 7:30 because of the traffic. We had to get out of there. And it's funny, I came to Winston, and the small group met at 6, and they were all talking about how it's tough to get up early in the morning. I'm like, guys, I get to sleep in here because they start at 7 a.m. versus 6. But anyway, that time here on Tuesdays that we meet, and it's a group of about 10 of us, is incredibly valuable because you're listening to other people and you're helping feedback to them. And having a group of people around you, number one, it keeps you accountable. And it also lets people hear your words and then they send them back to you in a different form. And that is reflection. So, absolutely, being in groups and having mentors in your life are paramount to having a good reflective environment.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, we're very much in sync. And what I have found is, uh, let me divide this out into two different pieces. There's the kind of reflection that you're doing with a small group and with your family and that sort of thing, and those are vital sort of things. The big question that I have been dealing with since I became a consultant 30 plus years ago was how do we do those same sort of things inside of a business where you have that kind of open conversation and you're able to say, oh, this is what I'm seeing. What do we do about this? Or what do you think of this? That sort of same kind of open reflection that is helpful in your personal life. Where does that fit in the life of a business?
Absolutely. And think about it this way. When a business wants to sit down and have a true planning session, let's say once a year they do an annual planning session. What's the first thing they do? The first thing they do usually is they get off site purposefully. And in most cases, they go somewhere. It could be a conference center, a mountain retreat, a whatever, a hotel that's at a nice location they set the table with the right environment. And that's the first step in reflection. You have to be intentional about where you go. Okay. For me, it was going to the mountains. It was leaving the city and going to the mountains. And I felt that difference. In corporate America, it's leaving your normal day environment is a huge part of it because your mind works differently when you're not in your office. When you're in your office, there's triggers that are keeping you stagnant, where when you leave, your mind opens up. And that's reflection. It's creating clarity. So I think number one in leadership in business is you've got to remove yourself from your current environment and go somewhere that's conducive to stepping back and thinking. I think another thing too is having honest conversations more often with the folks that you either oversee or that are on your team or that you report to. I think one of the biggest problems we have in leadership is we wait too long to go to people that you have an idea, which is essentially in most cases a reflection of their activity, and you wait too long. And it keeps promulgating and it gets worse and worse and worse. And then by the time you get to it, it's down a path and a habit's been created. So I think there's two things. Number one, have an intentional environment. And number two, do it more often. Why do we wait so long? Why do corporations do it once a year? Why are you doing a once a year corporate retreat as your only time getting people together to sit around and plan and reflect? That should be an activity that's ongoing because it's a powerful activity. And so that's where I would start with it in leadership. There's a lot more depth that I can go into, but those are two key elements.
What I discovered was that the problem was in the structure of the organization where it was a transactional kind of world. So you're coming to bring your ideas and you're competing with the other members of the team on whose ideas take precedent and that sort of thing. And and there's something that did not happen that precedes all of that, which is we're going to be in a relationship where we want to establish respect and trust. And we want to be open and we want to actually be able to say this is a team and not simply a bunch of competitors working against one another to advance their careers. And I kept seeing that whether it was in a board or within a team of an organization. I saw it in churches. I saw it everywhere I turned. And so I think what you're talking about is has a greater significance than maybe you even know. which is if you were to take this 1 year, one time a year thing and apply it as, okay, we're going to retool how we do all of our meetings so that we begin with reflection in our meeting so that we are somehow on the same page whenever we meet. And and that's why I like what you're saying, is because it's what I saw, but I didn't see an easy way to transition into changing the way these meetings and these corporate relationships function.
Let me give you an action step that I saw recently. A company did this, and I think meetings is a great place to start because everyone has to deal with this issue where they're running literally from meeting to meeting. And the problem is that you literally, in most cases, you're running over and you get to the next meeting. So you're already late. So you're running into the meeting and then you run through the meeting. So I love what this company did. They decided that instead of having a 30-minute meeting or an hour-long meeting, they would have a 25-minute meeting or a 50-minute meeting. And those are the only time blocks. You couldn't do a 30 or an hour. You had to do 25 or 50. And what you were doing in those 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the longer meeting was you were intentionally thinking about the meeting you were just in and taking notes and applying what it is that you're going to do with that information. So it's a built-in pause. It's so important. It goes back to your point earlier, Ed. It's intentional. And I think a good leader communicates not just that people need to do this, they explain why they're doing it. And so just that simple step of taking 5 or 10 extra minutes instead of running into your next meeting is an intentional reflective step. And the productivity that comes from that and the energy that comes from that is incredible. So I think that's one thing that I would recommend for folks is do something different with your meetings.
I remember it's probably been 10 years, it may be 15 years, but there was a video that was circulating around all these companies and places that I was, and I think it was a company that, and I don't remember their name, but it's like 1-800-JUNK or something like that. And they were junk collectors. You know, they come in and and then they turn that junk into money. But they would have their weekly meeting, and they had a protocol, and their weekly meeting went like 8 minutes, and they everybody stood for the meeting. Nobody sat down, and they came in and they had like these three different things that we're going to cover for the day. What are their successes? What are the things we're cheering? What are the things we need to look at? What's on our plate for us in terms of the work that we need to be doing over the next week? And what it showed was everybody was had a significant amount of attention, which is another word for reflection, on what was actually going on, because they knew that this thing was only going to be for a few minutes, and then they were gone. They're off to doing their other work. And I thought it was a brilliant sort of thing. Probably not workable in every situation, but in a lot of situations where you have people moving in and out of the building, it could work really well.
Yeah, it goes back to intentionality and then consistency. And as long and you build that into your corporate culture, that's where change happens. And it's fascinating. There's a gentleman I would recommend for everybody that's watching that you get your hands on this TED Talk. There's a gentleman that did a TED Talk about 4 years ago on reflection, and his name is Paul Catchlove. I believe there's been about 2.5 million people that have viewed this podcast. And Paul, it's funny, Paul's now a consultant for Boston Consulting, but he's had quite a transformation of careers in his life. And it's a fascinating, it's only 11 minutes. You can actually go to my blog and there's a link to his video. But he spends a nice piece of the video and talking about the corporate environment in meetings and what he did in his role to change that and how we use reflection. So that I think that'd be a good tool for everybody to check out.
Well, we'll include it in the show notes so that
Okay,
you
great.
easily find it. So, what are you finding as you now are speaking, you're traveling to, you're now a public speaker, you're in a new role in essence, as kind of an influencer. And so what is it you're finding in your interactions with people? Anything standing out that would be interesting?
That's a great point, and it's not a new role for me. I spent my entire career on the stage, so this is a I get my energy from speaking. So it's a way for me to continue my role in doing that and driving the purpose forward. I just started. So the book was published in November, and as you know, and as an author, it takes a little bit of time to get it out there. So it really wasn't until the beginning of this month in January where I was able to get it out there. And then Paul sent out a nice endorsement of the book, and it's really created a lot of frenzy because of his population. But at the end of the day, I'm starting to speak at Rotary clubs, and there's some church groups I'm speaking with, and there's some private schools. But I've only done one talk so far, so I'll stay tuned on it. But the one talk that I did to the West Forsyth Rotary here in Winston, it was very affirming because as I was speaking, and the neat thing about this audience, it was about 20 small business owners. And so a really good test audience of folks that are running hard, running their small businesses. And as I was speaking and talking about the topic, I could just see their heads nodding. When I first walked up on the stage, it was great, Ed. They were all like this. Their arms were crossed, and you could tell they're a little skeptical about who's this guy coming in here to talk. And as I was speaking, you could see their body language change, and they started leaning forward.
Yeah.
And I tell you the piece that got them the most, to specifically answer your question. I went deep into chapter 6 of my book on technology and reflection. And I talked about how the cell phone world has changed how we think. And I started out with the rotary dial phone that we had probably when we were growing up. And then all the way today where you can do pretty much everything on your phone, and it's taken us all the way. And I showed a picture. Of somebody from the 50s on the rotary dial, and then I put up a picture of 100 kids in a crowd staring at their cell phones, looking like zombies. And you could just see the expression on the face from the lady from the 50s was positive energy, and then you could see the zombie effect of the kids. And I started to dig into this, and I talk about this. This is not in the book; it's something that came up after. But I started to do some scientific research on what's going on in our brains that's being triggered by all this. And as we all know, we have dopamine that we deal with. And dopamine has two forms. And I didn't know this. There's the good kind and the bad kind. And the good kind is called tonic dopamine. And you get that from exercise and being around family and dinner table conversation and things that just create good arousal in your system, and it gives a slow drip.
Being on a podcast.
Reflection,
Being on a
yeah,
podcast. Yeah.
being on a podcast, uh, and it allows you to express yourself versus quick jaunts, which would be texting and swiping and snacking on foods. Those are bad things, but that's releasing what's called phasic dopamine in your system. And what happens is when you have phasic dopamine and your cell phone and all this social media is part of this, it creates spikes because it's releasing a ton at one time. But what happens when you have a spike is it's like eating a lot of sugar. You have a crash that follows it. And so the difference scientifically is with the good kind of dopamine or the good kind of activities that we do, it's a slow release and it's a positive, just it's like a baseline. And then the negative is this up and down movement of it. And so that fascinated the crowd. And I got a lot of people asking questions about that because it's something that we're dealing with every day. And it's something we need to pay attention to. And so one of the things I've decided to do was now as I moved to speak, I'm giving everyone a pause button they can put on the back of their phone. That it's literally a pause button. It says pause and reflect to remind yourself of put your phone down and intentionally pause so you can think and don't let this crazy phone influence your life.
It's a great idea. I really like it. So you're at the beginning of s- something that you may uh, discover is a whole new life that you didn't know was possible. I mean, you're talking about. Let me back up and say it this way: the sophistication of what you're saying is really significant, and I commend you for that because I think there are a lot of people who throw words out, and they try to be influential and just saying a lot of stuff. But you've got some real depth of what you're saying, and I think that's really worth people paying attention to what you're saying. And and I hope, I mean, you can obviously use this podcast to communicate this to people. But what is it that? So here's my question. I'm rambling on. Sorry, I apologize. But what is it that you would like to see as the demonstration of the kind of change that happens when people say read your book or they hear you speak or they watch you here and they say, oh, I need to make a change, or I like this. What do I do? So what is that you see that they can do, and what is it you would hope that would result from that?
Love that. And it goes back to earlier, being intentional. And then remember, I talked about that conversation with my wife about going from a noun to a verb.
Right?
You just described it. And so, what I've done in my presentation, and it was because of that reflection with my wife, is I have throughout my presentation, every time I bring up a topic, and I'll give you some examples in a second, I have an action step, something tangible that I'll bring up, and then I'll tell you this is something you can apply. Let me give you an example. One of the best places for reflection today is in the assisted living environment. Okay.
Hmm.
My mom is at a dementia care assisted living here in Clemens, right down the road from us. And we brought her up from Atlanta. And I've fallen in love with this place because it's a place where people are literally living out the rest of their life in a reflective environment. And
Hmm.
so the action step that I've learned from them is that they have 2 times a week, they have a calendar. And I think the word here is a calendar that they have actually put it down for 2 hours a week to have reflective time. One is called book club, which is they study a topic, and then they talk about and reflect on how it applied to their life. And the second one's called reminisce. Reminisce is when they just sit around and talk about stories. Because when you have dementia, they have really good memories of their past. They just don't have a good memory of what happened 10 minutes ago. So
Right.
it's one of those things where they actually harness that. But the action step is that the outcomes created is positive, but the reason it's happening is because they're calendaring it, and everyone knows that this is intentional time. And at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, you're going to show up, and this is what we're going to do. So number one is find your place. Number two is get a calendar and mark your calendar with a time that you're going to reflect. You have to do that or you'll never get around to it. Let me give you another example. I have 3 kids in college, so I just experienced this. And everyone that's got kids that are in middle school or just starting high school, you need to listen to this. It goes fast, and we all know that, those of us that have been there. I had a good friend of mine gave me an idea when my daughter was a freshman in high school. He said, what I want you to do is take a jar of marbles and I want you to count out how many weekends you have left from now until the day she graduates, to the day that you drop her off at college. And I want you to put that many jelly beans in, or jelly bean. You can use jelly beans or M&Ms or marbles, whatever you want to do. And it turned out it was around 205. I had 205 weekends. So the intentionality was that number one, I had something tangible to look at. I had this jar We sat it on the counter, and every weekend we would remove one of the marbles.
Wow.
And so you would touch that marble and literally hold on to it and realize one more marble's gone. And you would be intentional about that weekend because you knew that you were getting around the corner. And so it's great. I have a one of the slides in my presentation is the jar of marbles and how it gets down to the last three marbles 3 weeks before you drop her off at college, right? But it's the key here, Ed, and we've said it 100 times, is you've got to be intentional. And I think the other piece is you got to have something tangible that reminds you of it. It can't be invisible. You have to have it in front of you. So a calendar, a jar of marbles. And so throughout my presentation, I've got about 9 different action steps that I leave people with on little things they can do to transition from just thinking about reflection as a noun to moving forward with it as a verb.
I love that. And I remember those days. My kids are grown and they're in their 30s and 40s. And but I remember those days and how hard it was to let them go.
Yep.
You know, I have an idea for you.
Okay.
One of the things that's taking place right now in the world is a growth of conversation groups. I interviewed a guy yesterday from South Africa, and he's got a new organization where he's bringing people together, and they meet together online, or they may meet in person if they're all from the same place. I've been working interacting with people in Great Britain who are have a foundation focused on conversation. And I will be on a conversation tomorrow with a group of people from around the world. And I think that if you were to frame an offer to all these groups, all these Zoom groups that meet for conversation, to say, let me come and have a half hour with you one time, um, you could have a significant impact upon these groups. Because part of the challenge of a group is, yeah, we want to talk and we want to be together, but transitioning that to we want to be reflective and we want something to come out of this reflection that not only is meaningful to us individually, but also binds us together better as a group of people in conversation. And so what I'm going to do with this podcast is is I'm going to send it to people that I know who are actively involved in the world of conversation creation, because I think that they need to know you. And I think if you could take what you have talked with us today about and just share that with them, I think it could have a significant impact upon them.
I think that's great. And it's nice because that keeps me out of airports too, right? I
Yeah,
love the format.
yeah.
And I want to do a little travel. My wife said, you got to get out and see the world too, because you're going to drive me crazy if you're at the house all the time. But but that's a great idea. And I appreciate it. Appreciate the introductions. And hey, I'm still getting to meet people here in Winston. So I love the idea that you're utilizing some of the local resources as well to get the word out.
Well, it's the thing that I have practiced since I started my business 31 years ago, is is networking through introductions. And almost everyone who has been on the podcast have been introduced to me some way or another. And that kind of bridging the structural hole that exists in that network and bringing two people together who all have a relationship with a third, because it creates a kind of a strength that is hard to duplicate in more traditional ways of marketing.
Ed, I think the power of it though is one step deeper. It's not just networking through introductions. Let me take your word and supercharge it.
Please do.
You are networking through conversation.
Mhm.
There's a huge difference. It's one thing to be introduced to somebody. It's one thing to be introduced and have a real conversation, a non-rushed conversation. That art form has been lost in the world we live in. And just that conversation in itself is a form of reflection because you truly are digging deep and getting to know somebody. We have yet to meet in person, and I know we will, but it's amazing how much I feel I already know you because we've spent time digging in on one subject matter together. To me, that's a lost art. I think there's an entire generation of people that are walking around and thinking that the amount of likes that they have on social media is how powerful they are. And in some cases, there's some truth to that. However, it's shallow power. And I think that introductions with conversation, I think nothing can beat that. And it's a
Yeah.
lost art form. It's a lost art form.
Obviously, I agree, and that's what I built this on. And I decided that I would not have an agenda. I would decided there would no be that I didn't want my guests to have any feeling any responsibility to prepare. I wanted this to be an open-ended sort of thing. And then one of my early guests, and I'm John Morley, who's out in Silicon Valley. He responded. He said, "You don't realize how unique it is that what you have created." I said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm just a dumb guy that's kind of following the path in front of him." He said, "No, you have created an unscripted conversation, and none of our conversations in life are unscripted any longer. They all have an agenda. They all have an outcome, and 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 so that's why this is really important." And I think what you are offering to us is a form of unscriptedness, not so much that it's unscripted, but it's open. It's open to where it will go. Whatever your reflection leads you to is where it will take you. And I think that's really, really important because I don't think most people feel that that's the way they can live their lives, that they're obliged to follow a set of prescribed ideas or patterns or things, and they are really not free at all to be themselves. And it takes someone coming along and hijacking that sense of being under control to some other force to free them from that and to say, hey, you can go do things that maybe you should be saying no to things that you're saying yes to now, so that you can go do things that really are the yeses in your life.
100% agree. And once again, I go back to my comment earlier. Unfortunately, our society rewards you for moving fast and for showing how much you do. And it's sad because it's really going to drive people into the ground. And, one of the things I'm new to LinkedIn. I just got on 4 months ago, and I it's fascinating to me when it comes to January and some of the more prominent folks that are on LinkedIn, they send out this year in review. Have you seen that? And
Yeah.
it's almost like, it's a professionally done deal to tell their story, which I get, but they tell you all the things they did, right? Hey, look, I was in 90 different countries, cities, conferences, and it's a brag point to say this is how much I did this year. And then they get like a million likes. I like. And that's our society saying the more you do, the faster you move, the more you're appreciated. Well, that's counterintuitive to what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to get people to step back and do it more thoughtfully.
Well, I see that, and I've seen it for a long time, and I've been fighting that, and I tell people, I get, well, you'll appreciate this. Every day, every single day, I get someone writing me to tell me that I am not achieving what I could with my podcast, and that they are the answer to the question, how do I become a successful podcaster? And so and I don't talk to them because I know what they're going to say because they're only looking at numbers. But they're not even looking at all the numbers. They're not looking at all the numbers. And then I tell them, it says, I don't care about the numbers. I care about the relationships. That's all that matters to me. And the longer I do this, the more relationships I have. And then there's the pressure to take on all these causes, these global causes. And I tell people, I'm not interested in those global causes. I'm interested in what's happening in your local community. And so I have this global conversation, but it's all about local stuff, really. It's about who you are in the functioning of your life right there. Whether you're in you know Nairobi or you're in Vienna or you're in you know Shanghai, wherever you are is your local community. And that's what I'm interested in. What are you doing in your local community? So maybe what we should do, and this is how conversations go, is that we put some kind of event together, you and I, um, where we take your idea of reflection and we take my idea of introducing and networking people, and we create something which attracts people to come and sit down and have a conversation with us.
I like that. I mean, it's got a lot of legs to it, and I think too, Ed, just to kind of double click on what you just said, the first thing somebody's going to want to do when they're asked to come on your podcast is they're going to want to look at previous podcasts to see, how it goes and so forth. So of course I did that. And you know what I noticed? I noticed it was unscripted, which I can totally validate. It's totally unscripted. And then also that you create an authentic and vulnerable environment. Okay. And when you do that, and it's consistent amongst all your podcasts, and you can see it. And the one thing that people can see, even in the world we live in today that's moving 100 miles an hour, is they can see authenticity and they know it when they see it.
That's right.
And they also can see it when it's not there.
Mhm.
And so what happened was when I saw the way your podcast went with other people, you know what it did for me today? It relaxed me to say, you know what? I can be vulnerable and authentic too, because I know how he operates and that's who he is. So it's give and take. I think if you're going after numbers and you're trying to use the right verbs and you're trying to push an agenda, it's going to take away from the authenticity and vulnerability of your guests and the quality of what I think the output is. So it's give and take.
Thank you very much. That your words mean more than I can ever express. Because what you're saying is that I'm doing what I intended to do, and I am continuing to do that. And next week, I mean this will come out late February, but next week is first week of February. And so the fourth season starts next week, and it will continue to be what it is, but there's some themes that I want to emerge, bring into the conversation that have not been there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm grateful for who you are and glad to know that you're a neighbor now, not only a neighbor of my sister and her husband, but a neighbor of mine here in the Piedmont of North Carolina. And I look forward to getting together with you really soon. And is there anything else you'd like to share with us before? I mean, one of the things I've always um, have often asked of my guests is, so what is it? What's your hope for the future? Maybe I should ask that. Are you hopeful for the future, or are you suspect, or what? How do you look at the future, particularly from the standpoint of what you have created?
That's a deep thought, and it's a unique time we're in society. I think that folks like you and myself, we just need to focus on what impact we can have, and even if it's to a small population of people. If I can change one life, I've accomplished something because I took an effort to do it. And I think the problem is some of the people that get out here, they're trying to change 10 million people's lives. And what's the reasoning behind it? And I think the other piece is I'm not trying to make money off this. I think a lot of folks lead with the fact that, hey, if you get X amount of X, you get X amount of money with it. You got to lead with your heart because people can see that. And I think that
Yeah.
what this book is about, it's about a lifetime of things in my mind that I think the world needed to hear about. So yes, I'm optimistic about what I think the people that come into my path, how I can lead them, and I think that's what you can do. I can't control what the rest of the world's going to do because it's unique times, and we're fighting a lot of craziness. But at the end of the day, Ed, all we can do is what we can do, and if we have that attitude, and more of us have that attitude, I think we'll be in a good spot.
What I've heard from my guest is really two things. They have hope because of the people they know and they trust. And so I think that's significant. And their other hope is that that they want to believe that a better world is still possible. And so they have not given up on that. So their hope is really a hope that I don't have to give up yet. And and if they're not giving up, then they're going to give to something. And people like you and me, we can encourage them and say, "Hey, let's go do this together. How can I help you? This sort of thing." And I see that actually be manifested at the local level, the local communities, and that's where our relationships become a buffer against the hardships that happen in the larger sectors of the world.
I agree, and I think you hit it dead on. I mean, doing it together. Number one, it can be a lonely process if you try to do life by yourself. And I think finding other people that really want to make a difference, that's where it's at. I'll give you an example here locally. Something I just learned about is this place called Winston Starts. What
Yeah,
an awesome concept. I mean, they basically are trying to find the next big businesses for Winston-Salem by going after local entrepreneurs, but they're packaging up mentorship locally. It's a volunteer organization for people to come in that have been leaders in their field to help these future leaders to help the city of Winston. And I love that model. That really speaks to what you just said. It basically is other people helping other people, one person at a time, which I think we need to break it down that way. And
yeah.
it's a really good example of it.
I've had some of them on the podcast, some of those folks.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you very much. Look forward to getting together with you really soon. And
Yep.
we'll put whatever you want in the show notes. And if you have a picture, you can send me a picture. And then we'll begin to share your story beyond the podcast. I think there's a lot that can be done. And I'd love to see you have a significant impact upon places where they have already begun to nudge themselves into a different place and they just need someone else to encourage them or need something, whatever that may be. And and I see you as a kind of encompassing that kind of personality that they can not attach, but kind of embrace and come to see that there's something for us beyond what we are doing now.
That means a lot. And let's maybe we can rehuddle in a year or two and do it again. And I can give you some results on what I'm trying to do here because I really think that there's something with this topic, and I'm looking forward to where it takes us.
Well, whenever you want to talk on this podcast, you just let me know and we'll set it up. I give that prerogative to all my guests. So and they take advantage of that. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for
All right.
watching. I hope that you will take a few moments after you finish this just to reflect on where does this leave me? And what do I need to do sometime today that allows me to find some resonance in my life that gives me a sense of strength for tomorrow? Just a way of looking at it. And and we'll put a link in the show notes so that you can find the book and I look forward to reading it myself. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.